Welcome to Atlantic Center for the Arts Exhibitions Programming featuring Frewuhn in partnership with Seismique Houston. Today we have curator Janice Bond speaking with artist Frewuhn about performance video called Revelation. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having us here. I'm super excited to talk with you, Free. Of course, been following your career for a very long time. And, one of the things that I'm very interested about is getting to understand more deeply the melding of your practice that includes heavily, performance. And so being able to talk more about movement and all of those different things, just looking forward to learning more about that. So that being said, just start with, could you share more information about this concept of revelation and, how it directly connects to this particular performance piece?
Certainly. So revelation is a freedom dream, essentially. It's an incantation into the year of 2030, where the waters, the oceans have returned and completely covered the earth. It's speaking to the tectonic plates that are shifting physically, the tectonic plates that have been shifting emotionally over the pandemic. There's a lot of death energy, but there's also a lot of reclamation and revival and revelation, which is the place that we arrive once all of the damage has been done, once the waters have reclaimed and taken their rightful place. It's a concept and a metaphor essentially for what happens as we process grief and who we become as a result of that process. So it's a bit of a futuring and a combination of elements of micro compositions, of visual poetry, of devotion, and of movement.
No, thank you. So when you're talking about, I feel like at one point in what you're just saying, you mentioned like the return. And would you say that in your practice, like, is the cycles or the cyclic nature of things, would you say that's a reoccurring theme in your work or your study?
I think cycles show up a lot in my work because I look at my work as a hybrid academic thing where there's a heavy research component. Like I do a lot of study. Majority of the work for me is the study portion before I actually enter the performance realm. So cycles, cyclical thinking, cyclical matter, returning back to trajectory is a prominent theme throughout my work because a lot of it is, I think, a larger tapestry that I'm listening for and listening into as I work. And so there are a lot of threads that are interconnected that I don't always see on the front end. Sometimes it's in the doing of the thing, in the experimentation of the thing that I arrive at a place of discovery. So for me, what I have begun to embrace over the past few years is the process itself becoming the product. I'm not always interested in how something is going to end, but I'm more curious about beginnings that come from endings. And so that in itself is like this winding sort of circular, circuitous, or even linear trajectory that like connects a lot of the questions, like the research questions that I ask myself on the front end. And as I'm studying, as I'm synthesizing other folks' work, Black, feminist literary critics, poets, thinkers, movement makers, choreographers, theologians, as I'm like being in conversation with their work, sitting with it, synthesizing it, ultimately it becomes a process of ascension for me. And then boom, here comes the performance element. Like what comes out of that is the 3D experience of performance.
So I feel like a bit you're already going into what I was going to dive in a bit deeper, which is like your creative process. So would you share a bit about your studio practice and performance practice, like that led to the development of this work? Where are the overlaps? You know, where does it start? Where does it end? And within that, I also want to know, like, how do you know when you're done? When do you know when a piece is
That's a good question. I think I'll start with that. How do I know that I know something is finished when I feel sort of like a calm in my belly. I listen to my body a lot to sort of guide and direct intuitively what I'm doing and what the experiment itself is calling for. I like working with scientific methods because everyone can relate to something that is tangible. Everyone can relate to something that goes through a methodology, that goes through a process. And I think my background in methodology, whether that's like from a religious perspective, growing up in the Methodist system, taking everything step by step, putting everything through a practical framework so that it has everyday mundane use is very important to me. So I use that. I use the academia, I use the research element not to, I guess, continue the trajectory of the ivory tower to like make people make it inaccessible to people, but I want to invite people into the practice. And sometimes the level playing field, I think, is presenting things in a scientific way, asking questions, putting things through a mode of hypothesis and teasing it out, like using the performance as the experiment space. I don't think that everything is always complete when I present it, and I don't think that it's always perfect. But I also am not interested in perfection. I'm interested very much in being uncomfortable, in failing, in navigating and circumnavigating. And I think that is when the thing comes out and I feel charged up. I feel like, oh, okay, like I'm being carried somewhere, I'm being guided. And then I know something is maybe, it comes to a pause. I don't think it is completed, but it comes to a pause when I feel that there's no longer this current. There's no longer this like pull for me to answer a question, that the answer is coming, is showing up in the performance. And that my only job is to like get out of the way and be the vessel, be the conduit, be the one that is acting as the instrument for the intersection for spirit to speak through that moment.
my exact words that I'm thinking in my mind, because I'm hearing like the body and spirit as tool, as instrument, as litmus,
Yeah.
as weather vane. Like I'm hearing all of those things. You know, it's almost like thinking like if the body was like a theremin, you know, and like moving
Absolutely.
at different points of the grid, it has different frequencies, and being
Absolutely.
able to uh, identify where you are based on whatever frequency is resonating in the body. That's interesting. I really like that, because I also feel like if you were look at that from a more spiritual perspective, you know, a lot of people will refer to that, you know, religiously as like a discernment, you know, like having an amplified discernment that actually is connected to your physical form, right? So that's really cool. And I also like the idea, or the practice rather, of inviting people into the practice as opposed to which both are fine. I mean, it's just a different way of doing things as opposed to them just being the observer, which is another way of doing things, but it's different. You know, the results are different. You know, when people are just observing with no feedback, or if it's like a one-way channel, then the outputs have a tendency to be the same to an extent, you know, every single time, to an extent, because we never do the same thing exactly the same way twice. Not
Right.
physically anyway, virtually impossible. You know, why don't we get into a couple of things, you know, related to the piece specifically? What are components that make up the piece? You know, is it not just choreograph, movement, like what are the other components that brought this piece alive?
Primarily improvisation. Improvisation is a tool, I think a heavily used tool on my end, because there is a huge amount of trust, a huge amount of listening that goes into it. There's language, there's narration, there's storytelling, which is a form of archiving, keeping. There's composition, the arrangement of materials in space, spatial design, responding to one's environment, call and response. A lot of these things are rooted in African-centered, circular, tribal, cosmological, ontological type of thinking. And I rely a lot on study. I rely on a lot of like Eastern elements to sort of keep me centered and grounded in the work. I don't have a lot of formal training. I've learned a lot by experience, which is why I love improvisation so much. It doesn't come without framework or I guess order or structure, but within that structure, you have a palette where you do have to rely on environment, you do have to rely on space, and you're essentially responding to space. So the three elements that are present in this work is language, is the spoken voice, the singing voice, movement, moving through space, through time, arranging space and time with the body, through the body, using body as instrument, and composing the body as instrument, as well as playing instruments, intuitively, listening. When I sat down, a lot of these compositions came as a result of the intersection of where I was at the time. Being on sacred land, activating in sacred space, being in charge spaces, being surrounded by animals, being surrounded by the ecological environment, and allowing that to sort of be the primary tool of composition and the palette that I sort of chose to paint from, so to speak.
You know, thinking about sacred spaces and spaces that like influence it, it brings me essentially to, although we could go all day on this one, you know, I mean, there's just so much depth and layer to the practice just in the performance alone. But I want to know more about the collaborative aspects of the work, mentorship and influence. But within that, as I hear you talk about the process, it almost feels like the space becomes a silent or sometimes not so silent collaborator. So
Oh,
like
absolutely.
whether it's, yeah, you know what I mean? So yeah,
I
could
love
you
that.
talk more about like those collaborative aspects of the work, mentorship, you know, and just influences?
Certainly. Before I was even commissioned for this project, I was working on Side Being, which is the album that I have coming out later this year. And Revelation is one of the tracks that was on the album. Revelation was born a while ago, but is now actually like making its space in the world now because it needs to, and it can't be, I guess, fleshed out any more than now. It's time, and so it's coming forth. But I think as this moment was culminating, I knew that I needed other elements to sort of, I guess, make the work more prominent. And that has been photography, that has been environment. Environment has been a wonderful collaborator of mine, and one that also like keeps me, I don't want to say small, but keeps me understanding my perspective as a human in the world, like allowing me to understand that all of this is bigger, all of this is more magnanimous than me. And I think that also ushers in the mentorship aspect of it too, because I got to work with your daughter on this, Italy Alexander. She was a key videographer in some of the scenes, some of the movement scenes, and very intuitive, very willing and open to play. I think the conversation about play and the conversation about maintaining one's childlike essence within these spaces, within these environments is integral to the work as well. And so being able to have an opportunity to invite younger folks into the work to vary the perspective, and folks that also see differently, see different color palettes, see different scale and space and measure than you. I'm not a photographer myself, but photography is a part of this exhibition, and it's the ability to capture the stillness of the moment, like to capture the meditative moment that movement may not. All of those things are in tandem and at play. So I think for me, collaboration in this sense was sort of vital to sort of bring all this work to life. And it was also very much improvisational. Like I was just grabbing this and grabbing that as it was happening. It wasn't pre-planned, it wasn't premeditated. But at the end of it, it all sort of created this like quilts, this like tapestry that came together very seamlessly. Everybody was on board, and everybody was also experiencing the work in real time. Like everyone that I partnered with on this is also coming into this sort of shifting moment in their own personal narratives. And so we were able to alchemize that collectively.
I love that. And you know what that makes me think about, I mean, there are different variations of technology that you refer to. You know, the body is technology, actually using technology, cameras, etc., different versions, phones, photography, you know, as you mentioned, you know, music, audio, you know, all of that. I would love to know, you know, just thinking about this project and the exhibition series overall, what do you think the role of like STEAM, like science, technology, engineering, and math is? What is going to be its continued impact on the future of work for artists such as yourself that have such a analog connection to the earth, but utilize, or the world and people, but utilize many of these, you know, technological advances to amplify your voice and tell stories?
I think that's a great question. I'd like to answer it maybe in a few parts. I think about automation. I think about archiving. And I think about containers, providing people with virtual and augmented reality experiences that allow them to not disconnect their humanity and upload their consciousness completely into the futuring of technology and where it is going. It's moving faster than us. And I think the fear has always been around, you know, AR and VR technology taking over humanity. But I think more so we are becoming less sentient as we move on a forward, upward, onward trajectory, technologically speaking. So I think creating moments through mixed media allow for reflection, allow for the containment of an archive. The oceans are shifting. Migratory patterns with birds are shifting as erosion happens. A lot of these elements are showing up in my work and will continue to show up in my work because my work deals a lot with defeating the oppressor within, like challenging notions of protest and making it accessible in real time, like making it accessible within the ordinary everyday. And how automation shows up in that is being able to use technology as a collaborative tool, as a friend, not a foe, not something to resist per se, but to use with tool shaping in mind, to use with the mundane and the analog still intact, not separating from it entirely and completely uploading one's consciousness to a more automated type way of being, like remembering oneself. And it's funny because it seems ironic, but it's like you can use something that is forward thinking to connect and provide a bridge to the past. You can use them to bridge gaps, to be in conversation with and not be adversaries. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, you know,
I think in the music industry, Sandra, up here, what immediately comes to mind is that there's always, and I understand there's a broad spectrum of this experience. So I'm not looking to validate one piece, but it's part of why I always have loved well-placed or intentional sampling of music across genres.
Yes.
Because, I love how it immediately creates a conversation between, the past and the future. Like I think it's wonderful. And then you hear the original cut sometimes, like someone recently reposted the original, like one of Kanye's samples. And I can't remember the song right now, but it was like listening to, like, I had never seen the actual performance, but hearing it and seeing it, and it was like, the caption was like something like, being Kanye, like imagine being Kanye hearing this for the first time. And I was just like, yeah, because this is pure and gold and moving and something all in itself that can't be touched, but you can be in conversation with it.
Absolutely. And it's cross-generational, it's intergenerational. I think that's the power of sampling. That's the power of that technology, the ability to bridge. You see folks that are younger, listening to things that we were like, oh, I knew about the original, like I was there when the OG came out.
We're there now. We're there now.
Exactly. We're at that point, but that also shows how things are always they're always cycling, and how important it is to be conscious of how we contain and how we remix, how we reimagine things is itself being conscious and good stewards of the archive. I remember exactly what I was doing when I heard certain Kanye samples and certain Kanye songs. Like, it's a form of time travel, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Being stewards of the archive. Well, this has been great, just like every conversation we've had about your
Likewise.
practice. I look forward to talking and hearing and learning more in the very, very near future. But in the meantime, I want to invite everyone who has the opportunity to visit the Atlantic Center of the Arts to view Revelations, to look out for the online performance and everything in between, and anything that Free puts out into the world with this great knowledge and intention. So thank you for
Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Atlantic Center for the Arts.
Absolutely.
Estoy entre dos ríos. donde el limo se encuentra con la arena, donde Venus se encuentra con la madre, donde el puente entre nosotros se toma de la mano. Soy el agua turbia, el loto desde abajo, de la orilla. ¿Me recuerdas? Déjame contarte la historia de tu nacimiento. Déjame contarte la historia de tu nacimiento. Chapotear en el agua, recordar su formularia original, aceptar lo que Dios ha permitido, para aceptar tu lugar como la nueva madre, el nuevo padre. La montaña ya no es el peso de la adicción, de la pobreza, de una herencia robada. Tu cuerpo ahora es libre de caminar bajo el sol, pero mantén tu espíritu en la corriente. Escuchar. Aceptando tu lugar como nuevo antepasado. ¿Cómo es el Ariali? Te ha crecido una aleta. ¿Aún te esfuerzas? Sobreviviente. Igualar represión con encajar. Organice estos materiales en su espacio. You are a caterpillar on the ground, inching your way. What you thought you lost, you found. And now it's time to celebrate. Now it's time to spread your wings. You've become a butterfly. Now it's time to spread your wings. Oh, make it if you never try. Try. A revelation. A revolution. A revelation. And I won't close my eyes. I see that star so far, and it shines for me. I see that hole in your heart. Will you try and believe? Will you try and believe? Will you try and believe? Way down yonder, I was looking for comfort. And way down yonder, I thought it was never meant to be anything other than a dream. Do not pass me by. Do not pass me by, oh gentle Savior. Do not pass me by. Doing this test, I promise I am doing my best. Doing my best. While on others That's why you'll always be my rocket top. Oh, blue, blue mountain, you held me in your void. On the bottom of the shore, you sold me bitter land, you stole from predecessors, you run the streets with no regard for no one else but yourself. That's why you'll always be my rocket top. Oh, blue, blue mountain, you held me in your void. On the bottom of the shore, you'll always be my rocket top. That's why I cherish and protect you like I do. That's why I want the world to know you owe me and you better pay what's due. You'll always be my rocket top. Still gripping to the past, trying to get out as fast as I can. But it seems my world is spinning around. Where's your freedom? Does it roar like a lion? Does it pitter-patter in the dark? Is it north? Is it north? Is it north? Is it south? Is it south? Is it east? Is it west? Where's your freedom? Where's your freedom? Where's your freedom? freedom is where.
All right, so would you mind calling it out again?
Sure.
Do the clap.
This is Before the Atlantic. I was underwater. We were underwater. Take your little fin and swim. Swim good. 'Cause we represent what beauty should. Calling all crystalline beings. Remember your breath. You shall not be evaporated. You shall not sink. Take your little fin and swim. Swim good.
Super cool.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Yes.
When I awoke again, the waters had swallowed me whole. There was no more land. There was no more saffron. There was no more trying. I had entered a different world now, a world that I had to adapt to, a world that I had to change my breath. I found that there were others like me. Some of them looked familiar. They said they had been down there for millennia. They looked just like my relatives from back home. My granny, my auntie, uncles, cousins too. When they greeted me, they gave me a new name: Earth, Star, Wind, Eagle. They told me that I was a creature of the ocean now, that I would be safe here, and that they would be my new family, that I had come home, that I had returned to forever. I asked, how long is that? And they told me, forever don't have no end. So I took a deep breath. And closed my eyes. This new world would take some adjusting to. But I'd rather be here than trapped on land in a memory. They told me the birds would guard the air, that the sky twins would watch over us and make sure we were safe. That's all I really wanted. Since Mama covered most of the earth with her waters. Those who didn't survive had become memories. And those who did had to adapt to something altogether new. They would find themselves in a crystalline world that connected through a gateway that led to the stars. Not the ones we were used to seeing back on Earth, but to different galaxies, interplanetary, interstellar. This wasn't at all a dream. This was a new reality. It was getting dark now. I was tired and hungry, so I let myself sleep. I was somewhere between a memory and my new reality, so I let myself be. Home. Chilled my body, but not my soul. Chilled my body, but not my soul. Chilled my body, but not my soul.